All right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Friday, November 3rd. F it. It's a raw feed. We're doing it live. I'm Clayton.
Yeah, I'm Pat. Clayton, it's a bit of a grab bag episode today. Not a huge new movie opening this weekend, though there should have been. We'll get into that. But we've got some listener emails and we've got a huge article that I think we should jump into right off the bat. Variety wrote an expose of the Marvel Cinematic Universe of Marvel Studios and their current state. And Clayton, we've both read this. Did you find a lot of crazy new information that you'd never thought before? Did you find this article very enlightening with sort of angles and takes that you'd never considered? Is that what happened when you read this Variety article on Marvel?
No, the most shocking thing about this article was how it did not shock me at all.
Mm.
There was no
Hmm.
revelations in this that we had not surmised or came to the same conclusions as. I mean, there's things in here that we've been saying for months to years
Yeah.
that Marvel all of a sudden came to think like, "Oh, maybe we should rush this X-Men movie.
Right. Right. Right.
Maybe we should get Fantastic Four on the rails here."
Right. Right. Maybe Thunderbolts ain't gonna cut it.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And the fact, I mean, listen, this article does go in a lot of different directions, basically, to try and understand why the Marvel movies aren't what they were 5 years ago. And I think we've talked about this a lot. I mean, I think the to me, the biggest thing is the superheroes were always going to be a fad to some degree, and fads could last different amounts of time. Snap bracelets had their run,
Mhm.
and culottes had their run. And I think superheroes as the dominant, all-encompassing part of pop culture had its run, and it was a long run, 10 years plus, and after a while, people just can't want only the same thing anymore. And I think
Yeah.
no matter what, that is probably the biggest reason why these movies have declined to some degree since Endgame is just how long do you think people are going to want the same thing?
Well, because we're seeing that generational shift. I mean,
Right.
what has been so exciting about this year is that so many releases have been crapshoots in the sense of we don't know what this is gonna make.
Right.
And that hasn't been the case so much in the past few years because, before Marvel's decline, a Marvel movie would come out and it would do Bafa Bobo, and it was boring. It was
Right.
yawn-inducing. We knew
Yeah.
that the fanboys would run out.
Right.
But the thing is that these IPs and, even speaking about X-Men and Fantastic Four, those aren't slam doinks
They're not slam
because
doings.
those are, especially X-Men, those are Gen X and millennial IPs.
Yes, they're the Gen X men.
Gen X-Men.
Yep.
Young people don't give a shit about the X-Men.
No.
Not in the way we did, and not in the
No.
way that your generation did. Me being Gen X and you being millennial.
Also, I'm
So,
a Gen X man. Yeah.
yeah. So that I think is also scary for Marvel that their best bets aren't even slam doinks.
Right.
They
Right.
don't have a Batman to rely on. The closest thing to their Batman possibly is Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's it. And even that, he's stepped back. I mean, is there an amount of money that this guy would take to come back in a full capacity? I
I
don't
mean,
know.
there definitely is, because as a smart man once said, everyone has a price. But that price is going to be so high, and it's going to get so much higher when this guy wins an Oscar in
Mm,
6 months.
yeah.
Like, is he going to want to be on stage at the Dolby Auditorium or the Kodak Auditorium or wherever it is they're holding the Oscars, and he's holding up his Oscar for Oppenheimer, and then he's going to say, and now I've got to go put on the metal suit and talk to a tennis ball in front of a green screen in Atlanta for the next 6 months because I'm gonna be playing Iron Man again. I mean,
I'll
to
tell you
get
what.
Downey to do that, it's gonna take $100 million up front, which
Yeah.
you could pay. I don't know how that movie becomes profitable if you're paying Downey Jr. $100 million just to, give up his dignity again,
Mhm.
but that's what it would take.
There's a lot in this article about Jonathan Majors and how they're thinking of moving on from the whole Kang situation. Uh, guess what? Unless there's some contractual obligation that you have that you can't get out of, even if there is, pay whatever that penalty will be
Right.
and move away from this guy because this guy's a zero.
Well, this
This
here's a
he doesn't bring anything. He does not bring dollars to the box office is what I'm saying, right?
right, right,
He's a guy that is in trouble with the law.
right,
But again, it's not Robert Downey Jr. If Robert Downey Jr., God forbid, got back on the horse, broke into somebody's house, and then you have an issue with that, and he's still Iron Man, that's when you stop everything and are like, okay, we've got to scramble, we've got to fix, we've got to work around this person.
right.
Recast. If you want to
Well,
do Kang, recast, or do Doctor Doom like they said in here. Just
w
say Doom killed Kang off screen. No one will give a shit.
right, right. Do it with a title card. They get so you see things in this article where sources say, "Oh, they're so screwed. They're so tied into Kang because of he was in Quantum Mania or he's in the Loki season, whatever this is of the Disney Plus show." None of that matters. The real people you could get out of this storyline with a old-fashioned silent movie title card. And that's it. And people would move on. People in real life do not care about the intricacies of these Marvel stories, especially since Endgame ended, nearly as much as the trades or the executives think they do. If
Well,
anything, that's been the problem post Endgame is all of these TV shows that people are supposed to watch to be able to follow along have diminished what the Marvel movies are. It used to be I watched 2, maybe 3 at the height of Marvel of these movies every year, and I could stay up to date. Once they started making it that you've got to watch, 50 hours of television so that you could be ready for when Kang's in the movie, that's when people started dropping off. So, honestly, just forget about that character and move on. It doesn't matter.
the interconnectivity with
Mhm.
these movies started out as the garnish,
Yes.
and now they're the meat,
Yes. Yes.
and you gotta find other meat. You
You gotta
gotta
find other
find
meat.
other meat. That's the problem, is that the fact that these are interconnected became the whole meal, and that is not
Yes.
what people want. Now, dorks want that.
Sure.
The hardcore dorks want that, but the hardcore dorks are not gonna bring you Bobo,
Right.
right? So, the thing is also these movies have started to be too much like the comic books in the sense that they are bogged down in so much continuity. Nobody reads
Right.
comic books anymore. It is shocking when you look at the sales of comic books against how well comic book movies did.
Right.
Nobody has any interest in the source material.
Right.
And so stay as far away from the source material as you can because nobody cares about the source material.
Right.
Young people don't read comic books, they read manga.
Mm.
They watch
Mhm.
anime. That's
Yep.
what young people talk about.
Yep.
They don't talk about the latest issue of X-Men or Captain America or the Avengers.
Right.
They talk about Attack on Titan.
Right. 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 Our generation, our Gen Xers, they'll read the new Gen X-Men comic, but a 15-year-old or a 20-year-old, they don't care.
They
Yeah,
don't.
I mean, we've sort of talked about Marvel a little bit in terms of they they were gonna be a fad and this was gonna have to go down to some degree, which is true. There is no way they were ever gonna be able to maintain that 2018, 2019 high watermark. Um, but I think we also can't let them off the hook for their sort of self-inflicted damage. The TV shows being the big one,
Yeah.
and the forcing people to watch all of this stuff, which allowed more people to just drop off altogether. That's a big problem. In terms of the movies that they did, I mean, I would say a big problem is just that they have been so bad
Yeah.
since 2019, and not that, as the rose-colored glasses come off and you look back at just the whole run of Marvel, most of those movies were okay, and are unwatchable on a second time to
Th
me.
Thanks
But
for
they
coming
have
around to
but
my point of view. I've been saying this since the beginning.
you have been saying this since the beginning, though you also said that Marvel was your Star Wars.
I didn't say that, that's been debunked.
Has it
That
been
has been
debunked?
yes, we debunked that in another episode.
Okay, because that's still out there. It's still a rumor that's out there
No,
that I
that's
like to
not a
bring up
rumor,
every
that's
once in a
something
while.
that you said that was unsubstantiated,
Right,
that
right,
I had to pull footage and
right.
add to an episode, and now you bring it back up as if it's a real thing.
I just saw it again on a blog recently, so I just needed to
Yeah.
reiterate it. Yeah, people are still
Well,
debating whether
was
it's
it on
true or not.
Hipster Runoff? What blog were you reading?
I was on Brooklyn Vegan.
Okay.
So so these movies have gotten worse since 2019, and they've been propped up by things like Three Spidey Men or the sequel to some of the originals like Thor Love and Thunder, Guardians 3. Those have been high water, Black Panther 2. But they do seem to be in this point. The article talks about Marvel's talking about bringing back the originals, bringing back Downey Jr. as Iron Man, bringing back ScarJo as Black Widow, both of whom the characters were killed in earlier movies, though obviously they've got multiverses, they can do whatever, and people won't care, if you bring the characters back. Do you think that that is a move that A is possible and B would quote unquote save these movies?
No, because it's too early to do that, because there's
Mhm.
no nostalgic love for those characters right now. I think it's something you do in 20 years, right? And you can do it maybe once, get the whole team back together if everybody's, God forbid, still alive. But
Right.
there's no attachment from the general public to your OG Captain America right now.
Mm.
Because it when was the I mean, it feels like that he just left.
Right, right,
Endgame was not that long ago in people's minds, because there is a huge sort of time jump from 2019 to now because of COVID.
right,
Those years were long and arduous, but they also kind of feel like they don't exist.
right,
So if
right,
you brought back, and I'm trying to Chris Evans as Captain America, people would think, "Didn't this guy just leave? Like, why is he coming back? This is sad."
right, right. There is and I think especially with young people, there is a huge risk there of if you were to do an Avengers movie with Downey, Chris Evans, ScarJo. I mean, Mark Ruffalo is Hulk, who kind of has never left. He's been doing TV.
But, he's different. He's not a guy that could ever be a marquee star.
Right, but you're bringing him in. I guess you're getting Chris Pratt to be Star-Lord again. Whatever it is they're doing there.
We'll see
I
if that actually happens. I wanna see the contract there.
I mean, that seems to be the case, is that he's still in the fold, but and it's probably for a situation like this where they do an OG Avengers reboot. But I do think there's a serious case of the Five Nights at Freddy's generation looking at a movie like that and just thinking it's sad, that it's a
Yeah.
bunch of, that's, okay Boomer, the superhero movie,
Look at all these
or
old farts in tights. It's sad.
right, right, right. We want people in animatronic animal suits. We don't want them in superhero masks.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of Marvel has to accept a lower ceiling for these movies
Mhm.
and make them accordingly. In that article, they talked about how they're sort of shaping what the Blade movie is supposed to be if that ever gets made. And they're looking at that as a budget under $100 million. That's the way to go on a lot of these properties is look back to the kind of movies, the superhero movies of the 90s, your Spawn type movies, your Blade movies then, and they don't have to be the biggest movie of the year to be successful if you somehow are not spending, this Marvel's movie, the budget is supposedly $275 million. That movie cannot ever be successful. Obviously, the
It's cr
first one made a billion, but that's not going to
Yeah.
happen ever again with these Marvel movies.
It's crazy when you look at somebody like, Jason Blum and Blumhouse, and you look
Mhm.
at a movie like Upgrade. I know
Mhm.
that came out a while ago,
Right.
but that's a movie that was made for what, $5 million?
Right. Right.
And why can you not make a Blade movie for $20 million or
Mhm.
$40 million, right? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
again, let's not get crazy. I'm not saying
Let's not
let's
get
make a
nuts.
$5 million Blade movie,
Independent
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Not the director of Past Lives making a Blade movie for $4 million. It's just about Blade going to see his ex.
yeah, they're able to make these big budget movies like Quantumania look like absolute shit.
Right.
So there's a problem in the pipeline. There's a problem with where is this budget going to, and how much VFX do we actually have to use? Can you make practical vampires for Blade?
Right. Can
Or
you?
can you?
Can
Or or
you?
or is does he have to fight some world-conquering alien villain that's gonna be shit CGI in the
Right.
3rd act, right?
Right.
Blade is a down-to-earth character. Make him fight down-to-earth villains. Like, I don't wanna
Yes.
be the dork here saying what to do with the Blade movie,
Right.
but
But you are in a
I'm
little way.
talking budget-wise. I'm talking
Mhm.
budget-wise, make this a street-level action movie with
Right.
vampires that have practical fangs and facial makeup,
Right.
period. Do
Right.
that
Right.
and make it actually interesting, which is something that they have a very hard time of doing.
Right. Now, we've talked about vampires the last year or so, and mostly in the context of box office bombs.
Yeah.
Morbius, Renfield, Last Voyage of the Demeter, bomb, bomb, bomb. Vampire, vampire, vampire. Um, the whole Blade concept could just be the the perfect storm of people don't want superheroes, people don't want vampires. That could be a really rough situation. And
The
that
only
movie
thing
is
worse they could have done was cast The Rock.
yeah, yeah. So at least they got Mahershala Ali coming off of 2 Oscars, but if they had The Rock in a superhero vampire movie, yikes. That would have been rough. So, this article has sort of taken the internet and Hollywood by storm. There's some other things in there that I think are kind of big nothings. The director of the Marvels during post-production started working on her next movie. I mean, that's just what people do. That's what
Mhm.
directors do. I think that is a mountain out of a molehill. Um,
Although, I mean, I have said it, and I do think that from the director's demeanor in reference to this movie, that this is the beginning of the talk of, is Kevin Feige a guy who should be in charge here?
mm, mhm.
I see rumblings of Nia Costa being like, is it Nia DaCosta or
Nia
Costa?
DaCosta, Nia
DaCosta, I
DaCosta.
apologize. Nia
Mhm.
DaCosta did not seem, and listen, this is from various blank check guest stars starring, or, like being a guest on
Uh-huh.
blank check basically is where I get this, is that there seems, I don't want to say disgruntled, but there seems to be some sort of like, wow, it's kind of a bummer, this system that Marvel has going, right?
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
think if there's an ability for her to speak out, and talk about it, It's gonna be the beginning of people being like, "Well, is the way Kevin Feige runs stuff, now that it's failing,
Right.
is he the right guy?"
Right. Right.
I
Right.
I see that happening. I see that being the beginning of, "Hey, let's get this guy out of here," because unless he's making movies that make Bafa Bobo, he might have too much control.
I think he's gonna listen. He's had 10 years plus of the biggest hits in movies for better or worse,
Unprecedented.
unprecedented. He's gonna have, barring scandals, which don't seem to be a thing. It's just the work and the results. He's gonna have a chance to get out of this. And I think that chance is what we've talked about. He's going to do his X-Men movie, he's going to do his Fantastic Four movie, and he's going to try and get the original Avengers back together. If those don't work, obviously, then they start looking at bigger changes. But I do think he is going to get, and right there, that's 5 years worth of movies, you know. So I do think he's going to get those swings. Whether they will work or not, who knows? I mean, listen, like you said, X-Men is not a slam dunk. That X-Men First Class movie in 2011, where they basically tried to recast all of the X-Men away from the Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen X-Men, and they recast them younger. That movie did not do well. I mean,
No.
it ended up at 146 domestic in the summer of 2011, to the point where they had to, for the sequel, bring back the originals.
Mhm.
They had to bring back Stewart, Ian McKellen, Hugh Jackman as the leads to revive that franchise. And that only worked for one movie. The X-Men have been proven they can fail. Fantastic Four has kind of only failed
I
at the
mean,
box office.
those 2 those 2 ones that were in the, I
The
guess,
Chris Evans ones
yeah, the Chris Evans ones were middling hits. They were
were
never
middling.
huge.
They were middling hits, but no one ever loved any version of the Fantastic Four movies. There's
No,
never been a Batman 89 for the Fantastic Four,
no.
or a X-Men, X2 for the Fantastic Four. They've never had a movie that just totally worked with the fans and at the box office. So that is not a slam dunk, franchise. Obviously, people are excited that it's in the MCU, but I think that doesn't matter anymore because the MCU doesn't really matter anymore.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, the biggest opening weekend that a Fantastic Four movie has ever had is $58 million in 2007. So these movies are not slam dunks. There's no
No.
magic bullet for Marvel at this point. So
No, because Marvel as, like, an entity
yeah,
has one refillable character, and that is Spider-Man, and they don't even completely own him in the movies.
no, no,
Sony has the one Marvel character that is refillable like Batman.
yeah,
DC has Batman, who's endlessly refillable,
yep,
and Spider-Man is endlessly refillable, and DC has Joker, who's the biggest star in the world.
yes,
And I
yes.
think after Killers of the Flower Moon, which we both have to admit is disappointing at the box office a little bit, Joker is sort of up there above Leo at this point.
Well, I think
Until proven differently. Until proven
let's
differently.
let's then change gears and move on in this grab bag to an email that we got,
Oh,
because you
yes.
brought up Leo and you brought up Killers of
Killers.
Flower Moon. So I'm gonna read an email from an OG wannabe oh boy, Adam from the Stacks.
I
And I'll
might
start
say the OG. I
he
think he is the first person to email us regularly.
wow. So listen, we give him his respect. He sits on a pedestal. He doesn't stand on a pedestal. He sits on it
He
because he
sits
lives
on
in the
it.
stacks and he's tired.
Mhm.
Um, and I'll just caveat this up front. If this was anyone other than OG wannabe oh boy Adam from the stacks, I'd be losing my stacks right now.
You'd blow a stack.
I'd blow my stacks.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna read this calmly because Adam sits on his pedestal.
Yeah.
The oh boys. If Aerosmith comes out with a new album, literally no one cares. Scorsese is like that. He is a guy who makes movies for Netflix and for Apple TV. He's a streamo boy. When you go 150 million negative with Leonardo DiCaprio as your star, you are box office poison. This was a very bad choice for Leonardo DiCaprio. His star is waning. Martin Scorsese is a shriveled husk, a shadow of what he once was. Adam from the Stacks. Then P.S. Hollywood Reporter just announced they are producing Martin Scorsese's retirement film. It's a $300 million epic called Splattered. It's actually just a 4-hour IMAX reel that Martin Scorsese shat on. Day and date on Peacock.
Okay.
So that's an email from Adam from the Stacks. I would say the most insulting part of that is that he predicts that Martin Scorsese's next film will be for Peacock.
Yes, but I will tell you what. If I'm Peacock, I'm funding Splattered.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to, and that's what we said.
You have to.
It's his if this is truly his retirement, let's just take this for what it is.
Yeah,
Let's say that Splattered is the one that Marty's like, after this one, I'm going to wander off into the woods and die alone.
right.
300 million for the last Scorsese film.
Mm-hmm. And it's an
That
IMAX. I mean, Adam did say this is, I guess, shot in IMAX.
yes.
It's Marty taking a poo on an IMAX reel, but it is IMAX.
Number one, to have anything that is forensically tied to Scorsese will be worth millions.
Yes.
Okay, so the fact that there is fecal matter actually on this film reel adds to the value of it
Right.
because there's
Right.
DNA there.
Right.
So I think if this was true, Peacock made a good investment.
Oh, of course. Definitely. And listen, I think we've seen with Peacock with Five Nights at Freddy's, the day and date wouldn't affect the opening weekend
No.
box office of Splattered. And again, it's in IMAX. Marty's never made a 4 IMAX movie
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
So that in itself is big. I mean,
Mhm.
it's poo on an IMAX reel, but it's still IMAX. So I
But
think
has
that helps that
Scorsese
opening weekend box office a lot.
has Scorsese ever made a bad looking film?
No. Never.
So if he shits on an
I mean,
IMAX
even
reel,
New York looked good. I watched
yeah.
that in the last year. I had never seen that. Blind spot for me in Scorsese's filmography. I finally watched New York. It wasn't good, but it looked great.
Mhm.
So if he's shooting on IMAX cameras and he's splattering poo, it'll look great.
Yeah,
It'll look great.
he'll know how to have the poo add to whatever he's trying to get across. The other thing is, let's talk about the Leo side of it.
Yeah.
Leo was gonna be in Splattered. It doesn't matter, right?
Oh,
If
Leo's
if
gonna be
Scors
splattered.
if
Yeah.
Scorsese asked Leo to be in Splattered, he'd say yes, unequivocally.
Yes. 100%.
Now, talking about Leonardo DiCaprio's star waning, the fact that he was able to open this movie at 23 shows that his star is not waning. Because this was a
Yes.
4-hour movie about the brutality that was inflicted on uh, indigenous people.
Yeah.
The average opening for Leo and Scorsese together, I think, was $19 million or something like that. That's the
Yes. Yeah.
average.
Yeah.
This was above average.
Right. And that
This thing
average
didn't
is
open to
pulled high
10.
up probably by uh I would guess Shutter Island is probably the highest. I bet you that opened in 40 or 50.
Well, and
Um
then Wolf of Wall Street, I think, probably had a decent
yeah, I
opening.
think Wolf of Wall Street, I'm going to guess, didn't open as high as you would think considering uh how big it ended up being. I think
Did
that
that
opened
open to
probably in the
21 or
20s.
something?
Yeah, I think that opened, on a 5-day weekend, and I think the 3-day might have only been, yeah, I'm looking at it now, December of 2013. The 3-day was only 18,000,000. The 5-day was
Okay.
34, and it got to 116 domestic and, like 400,000,000
Yeah.
worldwide. So yeah,
He's
I
above
mean,
average.
it's above average. I think the difference is this movie, Killers of Flower Moon, didn't ride the wave of people wanting serious movies, and the legs on it aren't going to be what Wolf of Wall Street or The Departed or Shutter Island, movies that were all just much poppier premises
Mhm.
were. And that was always the fear box office wise with this movie, is that there was never that poppy premise with Killers of the Flower Moon the way there were with some of the other Scorsese Leo movies. That even if they
Yes.
were dark and violent, they were dark, violent, and fun.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so he listen, Adam from the Stack says that Marty is box office poison, that he's a streamo boy. And listen, his his last two movies, I mean, this is not a streamo movie. Killers of the Flower Moon, for whatever it does, has gotten a real theatrical release.
Full
Apple has
release.
not put this on the schedule of, hey, just wait until Thanksgiving and we'll see. The only real streamo movie he did was The Irishman.
Mhm.
That was purely streamo. And it's very interesting when you go back to fall of 2019. I do wonder what The Irishman would have done in the movie theater had it been released as a real movie.
Yeah.
Netflix gave it its 4 awards, run in New York and LA. Obviously, the box office was negligible there. You go back to fall of 2019, the sort of end of the salad days of pre-pandemic box office, and there were a lot of real movies doing well at the box office. I mean, we can't play coulda wouldas, but I do wonder if The Irishman would have done okay
Mhm.
at the obviously it costs 200,000,000, but that's
Yeah.
partially because when you make something for Netflix, it costs a lot more because they just pay everyone up front instead of
Yeah.
on point. So the budgets are not comparable to a, but if Universal had made that movie and it comes out in October of 2019 alongside things like Little Women that made 100,000,000, Hustlers made over 100,000,000, Knives Out,
Mhm.
does Irishman do well at the box office? What do you think?
It's gangster. It's a gangster movie. Those are the movies that do well for Scorsese other than Leo movies.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a gangster
Although
picture.
although
And
the Scorsese gangster pictures end up doing better in their post theatrical life than they ever do in theaters. Goodfellas did only make like 45,000,000 at the box
mhm.
office in 1990. So,
But again, and I don't wanna make excuses for Scorsese, but, um, home box office was part of the equation for a lot of, companies back in the day. You could put out a movie like Goodfellas, you could put out a movie, like Casino, and it could make its money back in downstream,
yeah,
right? I
yeah.
mean, that's why not to get into the woods here, that's why Scorsese had to go to Netflix to make The Irishman
Right,
because the system had been broken for no reason.
right. Now,
Streaming came in and ruined the business and made it untenable.
I could hear right now Adam from the Stacks. He's in his truck.
Is he a
He's
co-host?
is
Is
he
he
a
a
co
co-host of this show? Then you don't have to hear him.
Well, I'm just saying I could hear him in his truck somehow playing this episode of the BO Boys on AM radio. He's figured out how to do it. He's not listening on Apple. He's not listening on Spotify. He's listening on like 10:50 a.m. Stacks.
Love
And
it.
the
I
BO
love
Boys
that.
are, which I do love the fact that somewhere in the Stacks, the BO Boys are a morning AM radio show.
Yeah.
and he's listening in his truck, and he's changing the dial, and you got that fuzzy, it goes from country music to world music somehow, and he scrolls right past that, and then it's the BO boys coming
Well,
to.
you gotta have a preacher talking too.
He's got, yes,
There's always a preacher talking on one of those stations.
right, drive out the snakes, and then he turns the dial some more, and he hears the BO boys making excuses for Martin Scorsese, saying that, oh, if the 2019 The Irishman, maybe that would have been a hit. And he's swerving out of the road. He's swerving in and out. Almost goes into a ditch, has to pull his car out of a ditch because he's listening on AM radio, the BO boys saying, oh, maybe Irishman would have made $80 million in 2019. So, listen, of course there's silence, but come on. Silence is that was a for him. And here's the thing with Scorsese. He's at this point, like we talked about, I think he had his run in the 2000s and 2010s where he did legitimately care about making hits.
Yeah.
You know, I think that was a run, and he's had those periods in his career before. I think when he makes something like a Cape Fear, he's going for a hit. Color of Money,
Mhm.
he's going for a hit. He's had periods where he's like, you know what? I got to make a hit so I could fund Last Temptation of Christ. I got to make a hit so I could fund Kundun. And I think in the 2000s, he went box office. He hooked up with Leo. Aviator's a hit. Departed's a hit. Shutter Island's a hit. Wolf of Wall Street's a hit. And
Yeah.
I think he built up that equity box office wise so that he's like, you know what? At this point, any one of these movies could be my last movie. And I'm going to make them 3.5 hours. And maybe the next one's going to be splattered.
I mean, that's what these 70s guys did, right? Scorsese, Spielberg. I mean, Spielberg's a guy who's one for you, one for me. And
Right.
he's had a spotty track record at the box office recently.
Right.
But would you say Spielberg's a dried up husk? And again, Spielberg reached heights that Scorsese never did. But that's the mentality of these guys. It's, I'm going to do my art pictures and I'm going to do my artful popcorn pictures.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
that is an antiquated way of going about it in the current system, because the one for me now has to be done at a streamer,
Right. Right. Right.
on a streamo level, right?
Right. Because Paramount or Universal, they can't look and say, you know what? In 2 years, we'll sell 1 million copies of DVDs
Yeah.
and then make a ton of money putting this on TNT. Like, that's just not part of the equation. And again,
And
Adam's
that's
probably
why we
pulling
gave
his truck out of a ditch because he's hearing me talk about DVDs and basic cable, but
and we
that
have to
used to
say
be
this.
part of it.
That's why it was so comical when The Rock tweeted about all this downstream stuff, is because
Right.
the equations are different now.
Right.
If he
Right.
would have if he would have been able to somehow get this information across in 1996 that, hey, my movie is going to sell a buttload of DVDs. It's going to be on HBO every hour on the hour. Then it's going to be on TNT. That's how I'm going to make my money back. So all you jabronis can eat it. We'd be like, you know what? He's right.
Right. Right.
But the fact that The Rock was coming up with these hypothetical ideas of what this movie, Black Adam, was going to do, that's what made it comical, because the system is different now.
Right. Right. So let's move on in this grab bag. And I think we got to move on actually to what this episode is usually supposed to be about, which is previewing the weekend.
Yeah.
So this weekend, Friday, November 3rd, was supposed to be the opening weekend for Timothy Chalamet in Dune. Your whole two fingers, the symbol of Dune 2. And that is not happening. Dune 2 got moved to March because
Mhm.
of supposedly the strikes and the fact that Chalamet, Zendaya, Dave Bautista,
Zendaya.
Zendaya, Timothy Chalamet were not
Well,
able
no,
to
yeah, do
promote
that.
on the chat shows, on the hot ones, on the Instagram. And so Dune 2 got moved to next year. I mean, it's a gaping hole. this
Uh-huh.
weekend. We all think or thought that Dune 2 was gonna be a big jump from the first one. Dune 1 came
Mhm.
out in that COVID-y fall of 2021. It was day and date on HBO Max, and it still got itself over 100,000,000 domestic.
Yep.
And, this was supposed to be the Lord of the Rings: Return of the King for Dune. It was gonna be a Best Picture contender, which just on the Oscar front, it would have been so interesting if Dune 2 did open this year, because it would have been in that mix with Oppenheimer, Killers,
Yeah.
Barbie. So that God, it would have made this year's Oscars so much more interesting if Dune 2 was actually a Best Picture contender.
Yeah. I mean, and you mentioned Chalamet, who's hosting SNL this week,
Wow. Which, I
right?
mean, the last time Timothy Chalamet hosted SNL, it was the first ever emergency episode of the BO Boys because, of
The
course,
legendary hoodie.
Tim Chalamet on live national tele and we cannot stress this enough,
No.
live national television. Timothy Chalamet walked on stage at the end of SNL wearing the legendary hoodie in protest of Warner Discovery putting Dune day and date on HBO. And he
Mhm.
stood up for his production company, Legendary. He wore that legendary hoodie. It was big news. It was
In
the
box
highest rated
office
episode of the BO Boys up to that point when we did
at
that
the time,
emergency episode. Yeah.
for box office people, that was akin to your Sinead O'Connor's ripping up the
Yes.
picture of the Pope,
Yep.
fight the real enemy.
Yep.
He didn't have to rip up the hoodie. The hoodie was not something he wanted to rip up. It was the thing that he wanted to promote. He wanted to say,
Right.
"This is a good thing.
Yes. Yes.
Legendary is good."
Yes.
So, a brave act
Yes.
of
A
protest
radical
on the
act.
part a radical act,
Yes.
that Chalamet pulled off. I mean, it makes me wonder what hoodie he's gonna be wearing at the end
Mhm.
of this SNL episode. Can he
Yeah.
top that hoodie? It's gonna be very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, America does wait to see what hoodie Chalamet will wear this weekend. Will he will it be cheeky? Will he wear the Knuff, hoodie or Ken Enough, the Barbie hoodie that Ken wears at the end of Barbie? Will maybe Chalamet wear that hoodie as sort of a nod to his past hoodie? Will he wear the legendary hoodie again in a sketch, like not even reference it,
Yeah.
but just his character would wear a hoodie and he's like, "You know what? I got just a hoodie." He wears the legendary hoodie. I don't know, but it's going to be really interesting what hoodie Chalamet wears this weekend.
It makes it a must watch, and obviously we'll, in the after BO on our Sunday episode or whenever that drops,
Yep.
we'll definitely have to talk about how he did as a host
Yep.
and what hoodie he wore.
What hoodie
But
he wore.
speaking of, Chalamet, Zendaya, also Austin Butler in this Dune too.
Right. You had to move it if you couldn't have those 3 actors promote, because I mean, that's where all the sizzle is having those actors go out there and tell fans, "This is the hot young Dune 2 with hot young stars."
I
But
mean, the Bobby Soxers seats would be wet, is all I'm
yes.
gonna say, right?
So
And
so
so, yes, you needed that, but it is a shame because, like you said, there's a hole in the box office,
yeah,
and it's being filled this weekend by Priscilla?
by Priscilla. And listen, I am excited to eventually see Priscilla. I wanna see in the theater. It's
Mhm.
Sofia Coppola. Pretty much love her movies. I've seen a bunch of them in theaters. Um, I am excited to see this movie, but it obviously is not going to be a replacement for the box office that Dune 2 would have done this weekend.
No, no.
You know, it's interesting to have another Elvis movie or Elvis adjacent movie come out. I mean, do you believe Elvis was summer of 2022? For some reason, that feels longer ago, the Austin Butler, Tom
Mhm.
Hanks Elvis, but it was just a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And that movie was obviously a huge hit, but it's centered on Elvis. And this one, Elvis
Yeah.
is a side character who is, based on the Priscilla story. Maybe he's a bit of a villain in this. I don't know. I haven't seen this film. So I think sidelining Elvis and making him creepy Elvis is probably not great for the box office. I mean, the best Elvis is obviously, as we saw with the Austin Butler Elvis, skinny hero Elvis.
Yes. Yes.
And then your is your second best box office Elvis Fat Elvis or creepy villain Elvis?
I think it's Fat Elvis.
Yeah, I think so
Right,
too.
right,
I,
because the stamps remember when back when they were gonna do the 2 different Elvis stamps,
okay.
and it was skinny young Elvis and fatter Vegas Elvis,
Yeah, yeah.
and people were able to make their choice, they could vote. They
Right.
went skinny Elvis 100%,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but the 3rd option was not creepy Elvis.
Right. It was not lascivious Elvis.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I do think that that is not the Elvis people wanna see, and yeah, Elvis is making a resurgence, but I do think to a lot of people, he's an American hero, and a lot of the crowd that would go see an Elvis movie don't want to think of the dark underbelly of Elvis, and
Mhm.
I'm not making a judgment on that, I'm just saying purely as a box office play, you gotta have Elvis be at least a little bit redeeming and have some of the things people love about Elvis.
Right, right. Now,
In
again,
order to
this
be
is
big, this could be a spectacular movie that shows the true side of Elvis, and that could be awesome for what it is, but it's not gonna light up the box office because of it.
yep, and this Priscilla movie, it's not totally about Elvis. Obviously, it is called Priscilla, but I'm looking at the poster. Elvis is in the poster.
Mhm.
Obviously, you can't have a Priscilla movie that's not partially about Elvis. It looks like
Yeah.
Elvis is the second lead. There's no marquee star playing either Priscilla Presley or Elvis Presley. I'm looking at the actress who's the lead in this, who's playing Priscilla, and Kaylee Spaney. And it says here, she was in Pacific Rim Uprising. She was in Bad Times at the El Royale. She was in On the Basis of Sex. She was in Mayor of Easttown. You don't see I don't see a big role even in something like a Euphoria, say, where there's a
Mhm.
fan base that I'm missing. It seems like they cast a sort of unknown,
Mhm.
or little known. And while that she could be great in this movie, and who knows, maybe she gets an Oscar nom nom nom, who knows? They didn't go the route of Sydney Sweeney as Priscilla Presley,
Mhm.
or someone who I guess could fit age-wise, but also is a star.
Well, because who would that be?
Right? I mean,
I mean,
obviously
I think
this
that's the problem we have with both Elvis and I mean, Austin Butler was not a known guy until Elvis, but he had such an electrifying performance that now he is a guy. Now,
right.
whether he's gonna be a huge guy, that's a question, but he is now a guy.
Right. And the thing that the Elvis 2022 movie did was it had Tom Hanks as the big star in the other big part, and
Mhm.
allowed you to have an unknown Elvis.
Yeah.
We cannot undersell what a important thing it was that Tom Hanks was playing Colonel Parker in that Elvis movie.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
he allowed that to feel like a big movie even when Elvis was an unknown. They didn't do that with Priscilla. I mean, obviously the move would have been, back up the Brinks truck and get Austin Butler to play Elvis again,
Yeah, I mean, or get a
opposite Priscilla.
star.
Yeah.
The thing with this movie, and I don't know what the movie's about, obviously, but if you get a big star, say like Ryan Gosling to play Elvis,
Right.
but he's not in it that much, but you play off his persona as like, well, of course she's gonna fall for this guy because he's Ken,
Right.
and then you have somebody who is not as well known playing Priscilla, it would work the same way, right?
Right. Right. Because Elvis is the famous one. She's the ingenue,
Yeah.
Yeah. Get Nicolas Cage as Elvis in this Priscilla movie.
Cage is about to make another run at maybe getting an Oscar nomination for this new A24 movie.
The one where he dreams reality,
Well,
whatever that's
people
called.
dream about him.
Right, people dream about him. Yeah, I think box office wise, cast it like you said, it would be tough to cast a star in the Priscilla part because who is that young female star who's around 20? I mean, I I get, not that she's a movie star, but I feel like a Sydney Sweeney is the person there. But it would have been, could you get a star to play Elvis Presley the same
Yeah.
way you got a star to play Colonel Parker? So the tracking on this movie is, in single digits.
Mhm.
Box Office Pro has it at 3 to 8 million. I it's hard to even judge what this is. An A24 movie. I don't know if they've done a great job of making it feel like a cool A24 movie in the
No.
way that A24's best lane is always fake horror, is sort
Mhm.
of making their prestige movies feel like, oh, maybe it's a horror movie. And I don't think they went that route in what I've seen for Priscilla. So I don't think the A24 marketing machine is going to mean as much as it does for like an Ari Aster movie or,
Well,
some of the other fake horror movies.
I think along with the Elvis angle, this is Sofia Coppola a name
Yep.
that will open a film to a certain degree? And there's a question mark there because I do think there's a generation of younger people that Sofia Coppola means a lot to
Mhm.
because they watched Marie Antoinette 1,000 times.
Yep.
I think Gen X, obviously, a member of the tribe, so, we will always be interested in what Sofia Coppola is up to.
Yep, we are.
Um, but I question this as a real box office property here. I mean, uh, yeah, I don't see it breaking out. I just don't.
So I'm going to I'm looking at Sofia Coppola's filmography,
Okay.
and it is so much shorter than you would think, considering how important she feels as a filmmaker. But she has not made many movies since Lost in Translation in 2003. So Lost in Translation, Marie Antoinette,
Somewhere.
Somewhere, Bling Ring, Beguiled, which I saw in the movie theaters, On
Me
the
too.
Rocks, which was an Apple
Apple.
TV movie in 2020, and now Priscilla. So very few movies. And other than Lost in Translation, which got to 44 million domestic, another 70 worldwide, international, got to 117 worldwide. None of her movies are big hits. Marie Antoinette did get to 60 million worldwide, but everything else, I mean, Somewhere made $1 million total, Bling Ring 5.8, Beguiled 10.5. So I guess let's throw out here, will this be her biggest opening weekend since Lost in Translation? I mean, I'm looking at Marie Antoinette back in October of 2006. So what is that? 17 years ago. Marie
Mhm.
Antoinette opened to $5.3 million. Will this movie open higher? Let's go with the over under on for Sofia Coppola. Will this be higher than Marie Antoinette's $5.3 million?
No.
No.
I say no.
Wow. And let me just double check. Beguile didn't open up higher. I don't
No.
think it did. In its wide release back in June of 2017, it opened to $3.1
Y
million
yeah.
dollars. So, yeah, I mean, things like Marie Antoinette and Beguiled, they had bigger stars. Kirsten Dunst 20 years ago, especially, is height of her Spider-Man stardom.
Mhm.
And, Beguiled had what? Nicole Kidman's in that movie.
And Colin
And
Farrell, although I don't
Colin
know if
Farrell and
he. Yeah.
Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah.
So that's a star-laden movie that only got to 3.1 opening weekend. But with Priscilla, there is bigger IP. Elvis is going to be in this. Priscilla Presley is famous, you know.
Mhm.
Um, do you think do you think that this movie, Priscilla, would be a bigger box office movie if instead of saying this is about young Priscilla Presley when she's dating Elvis, it's a behind the scenes of when Priscilla Presley was starring in the Naked Gun movies? Do you think that's a bigger box office play? If Priscilla is promising, hey, you're going to see Priscilla Presley interact with OJ Simpson, Leslie Nielsen, you know, uh, uh,
Yeah.
Robert Stack.
I mean, if you make it a Jobs-esque movie, Steve
Mm,
Jobs-esque movie, where it's 3 set pieces and they're all behind the scenes of each one of the Naked Gun movies.
yes.
That is a movie I would see
Yep.
immediately.
Yep.
That
Yep.
is an unplug, walkout on a B.O. Boys recording.
Yes. 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 100%. And you're seeing the progression of, and this is a great part for some actor out there playing OJ Simpson. You're
Mhm.
seeing her interact in 3 different time periods with OJ Simpson on the way to him doing what he's going to do at some point. And
But
you're
steal
sort
his
of planting those
memorabilia.
seeds. Yeah, steals memorabilia. You're sort of like building towards when eventually he's going to steal his memorabilia.
Yeah.
Um, and you're seeing her interact with someone playing Robert Goulet. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't know who would be able to pull off playing Leslie Nielsen, but that would be fascinating.
Yeah.
That would be a Priscilla movie, and there's no Elvis at that point. Elvis is long past, and it's about Priscilla getting her stardom back her way,
Yes.
which is to we get to see her. What was it like on set the day Priscilla Presley had to get inside the giant condom?
Yep. Yep. Full body condom.
Yeah,
How do you psych yourself up for that?
right,
What
right,
sort of what is your process?
right,
What emotions do you cycle through,
right,
you
right,
know,
right,
to play that as sort of realistically and truthfully as she did?
right. Yeah, I mean that would be. I think that's a bigger movie than. And listen, that's obviously not the way Sofia Coppola wanted to go. She wanted to delve into the life of young Priscilla Presley and her relationship with Elvis. But I think if she had done the movie about each act as a naked gun behind the scenes, that's a bigger box office play this weekend.
Yes. Yeah. I absolutely believe. So, nothing else really that could make the top 5 here,
Hmm.
right? So, do we wanna get to our top 5s?
Let's get to our top fives. And I'm going to tease a little something for the after BO
Oh, okay.
because we have one more email for the after BO, and it's about Five Nights at Freddy's from Wannabe Oh Boy Reed. And
Okay.
that'll be what we tackle quickly in our after BO.
I
So
love
that's a
it.
little tease. That's only, of course, it's a web exclusive, only on YouTube. So if you're
Mhm.
not a YouTube subscriber, subscribe now because there
Yep.
will be bonus content. There will be a after BO in which we talk about this very interesting email regarding Five Nights at Freddy's and the real life implications of that film. So now, yes, Clayton, I think it's time for us to end this episode with our top 5 predictions. Would you like to go first?
No, I'd like to go second.
Okay. I mean, listen, number 1 is going to be Five Nights at Freddy's. So last weekend that movie made $80 million. It's got to be a giant drop off because of it being a bad movie, it being so seasonally centric, it
Mhm.
being on a streamer. So 60% drop.
But it's on Peacock, and kids don't even know that.
Well, I'll go 60% drop.
Okay.
in which that would be, um,
It still would
let's
be like 30 something, right?
yeah, that still would be like 30 million. I'll go with it's got to do 30 million. Yeah, I think it'll
Okay.
it'll go from 80 to 30.
That's a big
Um,
drop.
it's a big drop. Um, and then number two, Taylor Swift: The Eras Tour, the movie, going into its fourth weekend. That feels like a fad that has to be over. It made 15
Mhm.
million last weekend. I wonder who is excited to still go see this weekend. It'd have to be a lot of repeat business. I think it'll drop. God, this is a tough weekend for the box office. I think it'll drop another 50%. So I think that's coming in number two at like 7.5 million. Uh Number three, I think Killers of Flower Moon, this is where it's got to make it stand. I think it holds and it makes like almost 7 million. And then number four, I think this is where Priscilla gets in there. I do think it makes 5 or 6. I'm gonna go with the over. I think that Priscilla makes more than the opening weekend of Marie Antoinette. I think it gets to 6 million. I do think
Okay.
the high end. I think there's still enough Elvis and Priscilla IP recognition that gets a 6 million in number four. And so number five is going to be it's between After Death, Exorcist Believer, and Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie. I'm
You
gonna
could
say
check.
Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie
All
goes.
right. Wrong
go-
wrong choice.
I think that there's not a kids movie in this bunch, and Halloween's over, so Exorcist Believer is done. After Death, I don't know.
You don't
I'm gonna
believe
go
in
Paw
after
Patrol.
death.
I'm gonna go Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie number five. What's your top
After
five?
After Death has not gained the traction, obviously, for many reasons we've already talked about. They're doing buy one, get one free. They're doing BOGO for After Death. So Angel Studios
Wow.
is sort of in a, I don't want to say in a pickle with this movie, but they definitely are not, uh, lightning hasn't struck twice, let's just say.
Right, right.
So, number 1, Slam Doink, Five Nights at Freddy's. I agree with you, and I don't think a 68% drop is crazy for this, and I don't
Mhm.
think it's bad for this either because it opened to $80 million.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So, I do think this drops like a rock, and I'm around you where I think it's gonna make around 30, maybe 32.
Mhm,
Again, Taylor Swift, I'm in agreement with you. It had its time and it's over. So it will also drop pretty and saying precipitously is again, this is a movie that is at $150 million as of last weekend. So this movie is a huge hit.
mhm,
So the fact that it's going to drop off like it will, which probably will be, I mean, it'll probably drop in the 50s again. So 8.
mhm.
This is where you're gonna be mad at me.
Okay.
After Death number 3, beating number 4, Killers of the Flower Moon. I think Killers of the Flower Moon is not gonna have a gigantic drop, but it's still gonna drop lower than After Death.
Mhm,
And then I do agree with you with Paw Patrol that it is gonna be 5. The reason I disagreed with you is because I thought, After Death would be in the top 5 still, and you don't think
mhm,
that. So, that was my disagreement, but I do think The Rats Need Their Cheese, Paw Patrol, making a tidy little sum here, gonna be in the 60s, probably get to around 70.
mhm.
So, yeah, that's my top 5.
So
I think
one
Priscilla's out of it.
wow. Wow. Well, here's one thing that we totally didn't mention, and I'm throwing this in there as a end of the show curveball. There is another movie coming out from Lionsgate this weekend that's gonna be in 1,100 screens called The Marsh King's Daughter, starring Daisy Ridley. This
The
was supposed to be an STX film,
Ooh,
and it is now Lionsgate. It was supposed to come out earlier in the month. They pushed it back because of Taylor Swift. Um, and it stars Daisy Ridley and Ben Mendelsohn, Garrett Hedlund, of course, from I thought for a second Raising Arizona, different Garrett. Um, and it is strange father breaks out of prison. Marsh King abducted her mother. She spent her childhood in captivity. She's trying to outmaneuver him in the wilderness. So this is a Daisy Ridley action film that is coming out in 1,100 theaters. And it's
um,
from the director of Limitless, Neil Berger. He directed the film Limitless, not the
well, Limitless
pilot
is a
for the
great
show.
movie.
So there is this movie coming out in 1,100 theaters. Do we think that this Daisy Ridley action movie, The Marsh King's Daughter, throws any kind of monkey wrench in here? I mean, this feels like a movie that nobody knows about.
Yeah, and
Um,
Daisy Ridley is not a star.
right, right, right. So does that? I don't think that affects my top five. I mean, I
No.
don't see a Daisy Ridley action movie from Lionsgate that's in 1,100 theaters getting into the top five.
I mean, does it even make top 10? I mean, it's gotta make top 10
I guess it has to make the top 10. 1,100
because
theaters, it'll get a lot of, huh? Sure. From
yeah,
people who still wander into movie theaters not knowing what they're going to see.
yeah.
Um, and it'll get to a couple million. Maybe it'll get to 1,000,000. I think that's a fair amount. It'll get to 1,000,000.
Well, I mean, okay, so a John Cena action
Right.
movie
Right.
dropped last weekend and dropped at number 8 with
Right.
2,000,000. You think that that's gonna make half of what a Cena movie
True.
made?
True.
It's gonna
True.
make less than that.
True. Very true. The opening weekend for Freelance from John Cena was 2,000,000. It was in 2,000 theaters. Yeah. Yeah. I guess Marsh King's Daughter probably makes less than 1,000,000. All right, let's do to end the show over under Marsh King's Daughter $1,000,000. Over under.
Oh, I think this is under.
Under Playmobil the movie style. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
you're right. We had no idea this was coming out. So,
I think it's Armageddon time
wow.
for Daisy Ridley.
Wow. Wow.
And
Wow.
true BO boys, BO girls, wanna BO people
People.
know what I'm talking about with
Wow.
that number.
All right. So,
I will though, sorry, I am going to amend my top 5 real quick. I am gonna
okay.
put Priscilla at 5.
You are going to put it at 5. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it at 5. It is gonna beat Paw Patrol.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, let's listen. It's no three Naked Gun behind the scenes. Not that version of Priscilla, but people still care about Priscilla and Elvis to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's Sofia Coppola, who I think,
Exactly.
people get excited for.
Yes, our generation, our Gen X generation, love
Well, my
Priscilla. We love
generation and
Priscilla.
millennials also like it too.
So email us, theboboyspodcast at gmail.com. Thank you, Adam from the Stacks. Thank you, Danny, who did email us about Dune 2 coming out this weekend. He was excited for that film. He was very hyped for it, and now he's got to wait until next March and he'll get it then. But email us, theboboyspodcast at gmail.com. Follow us on social medias at the BO Boys Pod. Wanna BO senior intern Christopher killing it with the vertical clips on social media, on TikTok and on Twitter X. We are YouTubers, of course. After BO, the bonus show, the web exclusive, is only on YouTube, along with full episodes, clips, excerpts, all of that. So subscribe to us on YouTube and give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Give us a review. Love the show, blah, blah, blah. And 5 stars helps new listeners find this show. So, Clayton, I think we've done it.
Oh, we've definitely done it. There's nothing left to say.
No.
Except for until next time.
will smell you at the box office.
office.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.